With Pokemon Winds and Waves on the horizon, I thought it would be fun to talk about hypothetical things we could see in the next generation. Personally, I'm always interested in seeing both completely new concepts or expansions of existing concepts. For today's video, I want to make a new move for Pokemon to use. We will go over our move creation process one step at a time so that we have a nice, repeatable template for making future moves. For this specific move, I want to fill a gap with an existing mechanic that we've had for a while. To do that, let's first establish how damage normally works in Pokemon. When calculating damage, the games start with the formula, then plug in every relevant factor into the formula to calculate the proper damage value. The most recent games use this formula on screen. To give a simple explanation, everything in the parentheses on the left are things needed to calculate simple interactions. Mandatory, bare minimum, vanilla things like Pokemon level, move base power, and stats. Everything else on the right is a conga line of potential multipliers like items, move effects, crits, field effects, gimmicks, and whatever else is going on. What we care about for the purposes of this video is this section right here, A divided by D. This is the part of the equation where the game uses the attacker's stats and defender's stats. Most damaging moves follow a very simple structure. Physical moves use attack into defense. Special moves use special attack into special defense. For the overwhelming majority of moves in the game, that relationship is a predictable and consistent system. Physical with physical, special with special. Then Generation 5 introduced a new concept with moves like Psyshock and Secret Sword. This deviated from the pattern, allowing special attackers to curve the special defense stat and hit the physical defense stat instead. It was a pretty big deal because before Psyshock existed, dedicated special walls like Blissey were extremely difficult to pressure without investing in mixed offenses or relying on specific coverage. If you couldn't muscle through, you had to switch. Psyshock allowed some special attackers to threaten Pokemon with weaker physical defense directly without needing mixed stats. In Generation 5, special attackers got to target physical defense, so now in Generation 10, I propose physical attackers get to target special defense. So for this thought experiment, we will be using Psyshock as a mirrored template for every step of the process. We already covered the core mechanic of this hypothetical move, so let's cross that core mechanic off our to-do list. Next up would be the way the move is performed. After all, the move will ultimately need a description for the animators of the games and media, plus it's nice for players to know what is going on to stay immersed. Logically, Psyshock works because special power, which is basically magic, right, is condensed into physical force. In media and animations, Psyshock is often depicted as massless psychic energy forming a physical mass or imbuing objects with enough psychic pressure to behave like a physical mass. It's kind of like how visible light is a wave and/or radiation, but in fiction it can be manipulated with technology or magic to become hard light constructs. In simple terms, Psyshock turns abstract energy into a mass to deal physical damage. To mirror that, the reverse must be a technique that disrupts matter in a way to target abstract energy. For a fantasy world like Pokemon's, special defense is sometimes a tangible resistance to elemental attacks, like scales resistant to electric currents, or skin that is immune to heat radiation from fire. Other times, special defense is resistance to something else intangible: the spirit, the mind, the will, the soul, the astral self. So for the physical move that hits a target's special defense, humor me. What if a Pokemon physically knocks the astral self of the opponent out to deal damage? You know, like Doctor Strange. You gotta admit, that would be pretty sick to see in the anime, or in the games, or when we get Pokken 2. Please, Pokemon Company, please give us another one. Alright, now we can cross off what the technique is and how it's performed from the list. Now we get to the moves type. It's obvious that the move is not any of the elemental typings, and careens straight into the abstract and conceptual typings. Lucky for us, when we look at existing Pokemon media, there is a precedent that shows mysticism already exists across multiple Pokemon types. When it comes to special attacks specifically, fighting types use aura and chi, psychic types use mental forces and kinesis abilities, dark types use malice, sinister forces, fear, and dark magic. Fairy types use enchantment and magic. Dragon types often just use raw, magical, occasionally eldritch forces. Ghost types deal with death, spirits, and souls. Several of these could justify this mechanic, but if we want the cleanest implementation, one type stands out, and that is Ghost. I settled on Ghost for multiple reasons. First, thematically, Ghost fits best to me. Ghost Pokemon already deal directly with spirits, possession, and separation between body and soul. A physical strike that disrupts the spirit or astral self fits Ghost more naturally than any other type in Pokemon's universe. Second, structural and balance safety. Whether it was Game Freak's intentional balance philosophy or a happy little accident, both Psyshock and Secret Sword have resistances and immunities for counterplay. Dark types are immune to Psyshock, Ghost types are immune to Secret Sword. When introducing a new mechanic with potentially large implications, it helps if something's immune to it. Special attackers gained a move that allows them to stay in on Pokemon that would otherwise wall them, but if they reveal that they have the move and intend to stay in, they risk an opponent using the immunity to switch in for free to punish them. Making this move Ghost type means normal types are completely immune. That makes the mechanic safer to implement while testing its impact. Third, expandability. We do not need to have zero-sum thinking about this. Starting with Ghost does not limit future design. Fairy, Psychic, Fighting, or Dark-type clones could exist later. Once it has proven itself to be a fair mechanic, we can implement clones of other types, and each of those types can get moves better suited to the thematics of the types and the Pokemon in those groups. But right now, Ghost is the cleanest starting template. Fourth, it gives physical Ghost types some more utility. Yes, Ghost lately has been a pretty strong type, so I get that people may get emotionally reactive about seeing what looks like a buff to Ghost. If you take a step back and think about it, what Ghost type moves are being spammed? Singles or VGC, it was likely Shadow Ball, Moongeist Beam, Astral Barrage, or Hex, right? When we look at the successful and offensive Ghost types, they are overwhelmingly special attackers. When we look at Pokemon that on paper are physical ghosts like Aegislash and Dragapult, in practice, they can't be completely physical without making compromises. In the case of Dragapult, it has to use Phantom Force, a 2-turn move, for Ghost Stab, and it doesn't learn Shadow Claw. So many people make it a special attacker, mixed attacker, or U-turn spammer with status. Aegislash has even attacking stats, so it doesn't really care what it uses. Gyro Ball off of low speed, access to Swords Dance plus Stab Shadow Sneak, and so many more tools were perfectly good. Furthermore, Aegislash is playing its own game within the game of Pokemon with its stance change mechanic. Marshadow is a mythical that was given a strong physical Ghost signature move that it could spam alongside close combat, so again, it's an exception that proves the rule. Most Ghost physical attackers have to rely on gimmicks or signature moves to have a physical Ghost move better than Shadow Claw. Phantom Force, Poltergeist, Rage Fist, and the like all have some kind of gimmick or limitation that isn't as simple as clicking Shadow Ball. Given why Ghost is strong right now, this new Ghost move is a way to distribute something to the pores of the Ghost type like Dust Noir, while still gatekeeping the billionaires of the Ghost type like Shadow Rider Calyrex and Fluttermane. That's typing checked off. Next would be the move's attributes and statistics. Like with every other step in this process, it should mirror Game Freak's design precedent. Special attackers generally benefit from consistency, accuracy, and not being offensively crippled by burn. Physical attackers deal with burn having damage, intimidate cycling, and contact punishment abilities. Psyshock has 80 base power and perfect accuracy. Physical moves tend to be slightly stronger with base power in exchange for accuracy. Following the system's logic, this move should be slightly stronger and slightly less accurate. How about we try something around 90 base power and 95 accuracy with 15 power points? That seems fair considering the many downsides. After all, this move still requires getting into range, making contact, and landing the hit before damaging the opponent's spirit. Mechanically, it is physical in every way until the damage calculation uses physical attack to target the opponent's special defense. So it's still subject to all the difficulties physical attackers have to play around. It is still affected by burn because that's an attack modifier. It makes contact with the opponent, so it triggers all the contact abilities and contact items like Static and Rocky Helmet. Intimidate cycling isn't going to be fun for them to deal with either. I think that covers everything for attributes, so we'll just check that off the list. Next is move distribution. This move should be treated as a technique, not an instinct. That means it should not automatically be learned by all ghost types, nor should it be restricted only to ghost types. Just like with Psyshock, some Pokemon would learn it based on whether or not they logically could perform the technique. For example, Psyshock is mostly learned by psychic types, which makes sense, but other Pokemon capable of this type of psychokinesis are capable of learning it too. Of the non-psychic types that learn Psyshock, it's mainly other Pokemon that have supernatural occult-like powers without being a proper psychic type, like the Golduck and Ninetales lines. There's also a few Ghost, Fairy, and Normal types that get the move, such as the Yamask or Mischievous lines, a bunch of the pink blob fairy Pokemon, and Stantler, even before it got a psychic type evolution. If you look at the list of Pokemon that learn Psyshock, they all have some reason. Wait, what the? Great Tusk? With these stats? What does Psyshock even do for it? It's a 700-pound dinosaur tire. Just run them over. Well, I guess the core points of what I said generally apply for distribution. Similarly, this move should be distributed based on the ability to perform it. Dusknoir and Banette are both physical ghosts and would probably love access to this move. The question becomes, can they perform a technique like this? Dusknoir likely can because it's a soul-stealing Grim Reaper that can enter and exit the spirit world. Banette potentially can't, as it's a toy that is so vindictive and spiteful about its abandonment that it becomes a voodoo doll full of cursed energy and malice. This is just an example, of course. I'd love it if both got a move like this, but the main point is to demonstrate the concept's line of logic. Within these parameters, the Gengar line, despite being special attackers that probably wouldn't use this move, still would likely have access to it. In the anime, in the episode Tower of Terror, Haunter pulls a projection of Ash and Pikachu out of their unconscious bodies. Any non-ghost type that has performed or could perform this feat would also get access. The opportunities really are everywhere to do something cool with this. Distributing based on what can perform the technique as opposed to distributing to ghost types alone allows us flexibility and levers to adjust for future game balancing and changes. With that, we have another item checked off our list. Finally, we get to the name. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you already know my stance about strategic naming and how form over function has caused many foolish issues with the clarity of game mechanics. If you haven't, watch my video about the Iron Fist ability after this one. For this new move, we need something mechanically neutral and flexible. It's a test move, a template, so we want to assess its performance raw without it overlapping with too many other mechanics. The name cannot imply punching, slashing, biting, sound, pulse, or any other category that would unintentionally make it fall into move category boosts or move category negations like Iron Fist or Soundproof. There's already a lot to factor in, just look how long this video is right now. We also want the move name vague enough that a Pokemon's anatomy doesn't automatically disqualify it from learning the move, or limit us from adjusting distribution in the future. Again, it should be about if the species of Pokemon can knock your soul out of your body with a strike, be it with fist, foot, knee, claw, jaw, horns, wing, tail, or tongue. Can they canonically do it somehow? Imagine if Psyshock was instead Psychic Fist. You'd have to make it a punching move or be another non-punching move that just looks like a punch. The name also needs to localize cleanly across languages, since usually the names are developed in Japanese first, then localized around the globe to properly communicate mechanics to consumers. For these many reasons, I'll call the move Astral Strike. Simple and clean, but vague enough that we aren't putting ourselves in a flashy but restrictive box down the road. Strike clearly communicates, or at least reasonably implies, that we are making physical contact while performing the technique, while still being vague enough that the move doesn't have any anatomical requirement, nor will fall into any specific move category like punching or biting. Astral emphasizes the metaphysical nature of the attack, that it hits the spirit, soul, astral form of the target. This semantically differentiates it from the Ki, Chi, fighting spirit, aura that would make it overlap with the fighting type, or Pokemon with lore related to aura like Lucario. It also prevents us from semantically drifting into things like Grimmsnarl's fairy type move Spirit Break, Soul Crush, as this move's action of spirit and soul breaking that drops special attack seems to be willpower related. I avoid using shadows since moves related to shadow manipulation weaponize the shadows themselves or use the shadows to conceal attacks. Shadow Sneak extends the user's shadow, Shadow Punch manipulates or conceals the punch in shadows, Shadow Stitch, or as us English speakers know it, Spirit Shackle, pins the user's shadow down to prevent their movement, not their soul or spirit. Marshadow's move Shadow Steal, again, English speakers know it as Spectral Thief, once again manipulates or conceals using shadows. The use of Phantom is also avoided because Phantom moves tend to involve the user becoming intangible in some way or emphasizes intangibility of the attacker themselves. Finally, I'm not calling it Soul Strike because both words together overlap in multiple languages with Soul Stealing 7-star Strike, Marshadow's signature Z move. Astral communicates exactly what the move does without drifting into other conceptual spaces. Astral is only used for one other ghost move, Astral Barrage, and that won't cause a conflict because a single Astral Strike is clearly distinct from a barrage. This is also consistent with the Japanese name because it's still called Astral Bit, Astral Bit, and the move involves shooting a barrage of small ghosts. The small ghosts are the bits being barraged at the opponent for that move. Logically, it follows that Astral Strike is just knocking out the opponent's singular ghost. The Japanese name that we theoretically would have had to localize from into our English name could go a few ways. We could go with a fully Japanese name like Reigeki, which would roughly mean Spirit Strike. We can go with a compound name of Wago, a natively Japanese word, and Garaigo, a foreign loan word, often English, like how Bubble Beam is Baburu Kosen, where Baburu is an English loan word in katakana and Kosen is native Japanese hiragana. If we went with this option, it would be Astral Geki. Astral, katakana for this, like with Astral Bit, plus Strike. I'm not a native Japanese speaker, so I might just be biased, but this doesn't sound quite right. I don't know how to explain it, it just sounds off. Like, to use an analogy with English, if I heard someone shout out, Samurai Slice, that sounds uncool but grammatically fine as a compound word of Japanese and English, to people whether or not they know what samurai means. If I heard someone shout, Swordsman Kiru, it would sound off to everyone, right? If you're wondering why I'm not proposing full-on Astral Strike, it's because I noticed no Pokemon moves use Strike. I found it really odd and started reading down the list of moves. I saw Attack, Break, Crush, Punch, Kick, Dive, Drive, Impact, and so on, but no Strike. Other games I've played in Japanese or researched the Japanese texts in have no issue using Strike. So it didn't seem to overlap with a slur or some kind of censored word I could find. Then I wondered if it overlapped with the name of some status effect, mechanic, or character, because for Strike to not appear for nearly 30 years means the conflict was right there from the start. It turns out that Scyther's name is Strike, so that's why we can't call it Astral Strike. It's because in Japanese Pokemon games, any kind of Strike is a Strike. I always discover some crazy trivia when I do these videos. Subscribe for more tangents like this. Anyway, I'm mostly thinking about this just to be thorough, so it's not really important for our purposes. If there are any native Japanese speakers out there in the audience, please help me out and tell me what a hypothetical original Japanese name for this move would be. Thank you. And with that, naming is complete, so our checklist is complete. Here is our completed move. Astral Strike. 90 base power, 95 accuracy, 15 power points. The user strikes the target, ejecting its spirit to deal damage. This move deals special damage. Sensational. Alright, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.